Hello, welcome to Precontation Points Video Snark. For those of you who are new here, I read bad books and discuss where they went wrong. If you clicked on this thinking that it was an audiobook, please stick around. Maybe you might learn something, like reading and listening comprehension. I'm starting Funny You Should Ask by Elissa Sussman. This book was recommended to me by my lovely patron supporter, Nikki. As a reminder to anybody watching, I will take book recommendations from anybody, but my queue is usually a lot more open on Patreon, and I'll probably get around to something you suggest a lot faster over there. Hint, hint. Now, as usual, I took a sneak peek at some of the reviews for a taste of what was to come. Several of them spoke of how this was some name-changed real person fic featuring Chris Evans. I have read and enjoyed a book with another celebrity setup before, but as I keep saying over and over, I don't care if things are cliche. It's if the book is fun that's the difference between a bland and mediocre 3 stars or a wow 5 stars. Prologue. The book opens up with this kind of info-dumpy background to catch the readers up to speed. 10 years ago, our unnamed main character did a huge interview with then up-and-coming celebrity Gabe Parker. This interview was literally career-launching, not only for Gabe but also for unnamed MC as well. She's gotten so many other interviews because of her Gabe interview, and also has book deals. Gabe went on to not only marry a supermodel and to star in many movies, but was also literally James Bond. But that was 10 years ago, and as many people know, a lot can happen in a decade. Gabe's star fell, and it fell in the typical Hollywood fashion. Messy divorce, using drug rehab like a revolving door, being fired from the next James Bond movie, and now unnamed main character's boss, co-worker, secretary wants her to recreate the Gabe interview. MC hums and haws for a little bit, saying that she's been going out of her way to avoid Gabe up until now, but she eventually caves and agrees to meet up with Gabe. Overall, a kind of a neutral start. As I said, it's a little info dumpy, what with MC sitting there and simply explaining things to the reader. This does get us out of the way of needing to show us what happened 10 years earlier and getting right down to the actual story. But I somehow feel like maybe that wouldn't have been the better way of doing it, especially because everybody can see the table of contents and see how the story is divided into then, now, Saturday, then. We're going to see flashbacks. Could the author simply have not explained all of this to us along the way? So I thought that this was a chapter, but it's actually some in-between nonsense. I'm still going to count it as a chapter though, and we'll probably, I don't know, I'll see how I feel about the upload schedule after reading this subchapter. The chapter is titled Gabe Parker, Shaken, Not Stirred, Part 1. The entire thing appears to be part of the interview that the MC had with Gabe all those years ago. Her name is listed as the author of the article as Channy, which is a weird way to introduce her name. I've seen way worse ways, but I'm also not exactly a big fan of this. Anyway, the interview kicks off with Gabe thrusting a puppy into Channy's arms and cleaning up a puppy mess from the floor, shirtless, which I suppose is a good way to humanize literally anybody. It's hard to find fault with somebody as they clean up a puppy mess. Channy also says that a lot of people might have picked up her article so that they could find out that Gabe's squeaky clean public image was only the work of a good publicist, yet she herself started off her article by, again, humanizing him by showing that he was doing mundane house cleaning, so it's kind of a weird comment for her to throw in. He smells amazing, by the way, like lumber and peppermint in the backseat of the Ford Focus where you had your very first kiss with the guy from Jewish summer camp who you knew had already kissed all of your friends, but had an eyebrow piercing and turned out to be really, really good with his tongue. This is a little too personal, and I'm uncomfortable. Need I remind the readers that this is supposed to be the award-winning interview that launched Channy's career? They go out to lunch where Channy will not stop gushing about how normal and down-to-earth that Gabe is, to the point where it honestly starts to seem rather awkwardly forced, which makes me think of how she'd mentioned Gabe's good PR team making him into this squeaky clean guy, when she herself is clearly doing the exact same thing. Literally not one single person who picked up this week's edition of People magazine reading this would actually think that Gabe is honestly this nice. Like, what's his angle? What's the interview's angle? He also plugs the bookshop he bought for his mom and sister when he got his first big Hollywood role, which again comes off as essentially disingenuous, if only because there is no way that a man has an interest in the company that he literally bought for his mom and sister. Nope, he isn't invested at all. He also denies the rumors that there's anything going on between him and one of his co-stars in the James Bond movies. However, thanks to the prologue that quickly spelled out the life of Gabe for us, we already know that not only is what Gabe told her during this interview completely untrue, but that their relationship ended in a really messy way. And as I'm thinking about this little tidbit and how the prologue also told us that not even a week after this interview came out, Gabe ran off and got married to Jacinda, why did nobody look at the interview and go, well, if Gabe lied about his relationship with Jacinda, what else was he lying about? The interview takes a more somber turn as they start talking about his upcoming role as James Bond, how the angry internet mob was canceling him because he didn't fit into the stereotype of the character, that up until he'd landed the role of James Bond, he typically played himbos, that is to say, dim-witted hunks. At this point, they leave the restaurant and randomly go on a house tour. While they're driving there, he starts asking her if she's really actually born and raised in LA and not simply a neighboring area like Anaheim. Channy agrees that she is a native and a real one at that. They look at the house, but Gabe decides to defer to Channy's personal taste. That is that even though it's his money and it would be his house, since Channy doesn't like the style of the house, neither does Gabe. He says that he has a premiere the next night and Channy wrangles an invite to the after party. And, okay, yeah, not going to be squeezing those in between 4 normal chapters. What a pain. I'm going to have to completely rework my upload schedule because of this. This entire section is entitled Then, so all of this is a flashback. Chapter 1. Channy is nervous upon her arrival at the interview location, and not a cute little anxiousness, but like giant armpit sweat stains kind of nervousness. She explains to the reader that Gabe is her one celebrity free pass she had in her previous relationship, which honestly seems kind of a weird thing to have considering her profession, but whatever. This is Channy continues on that I suddenly realized that I'd forgotten what section that I was in. This isn't the present day, but rather a flashback. This is her first big gig as a celebrity reporter, so now her anxiety makes a little bit more sense. She finally works up the nerve to go and knock on his door, and if you somehow missed the part where this is a romance novel, the author beating you around the head with how hot Gabe is should clue you in. Anyway, exactly as it had unfolded in their interview from the previous chapter, Gabe shoved the puppy into Channy's arms and used his shirt to wipe up the mess. As if the entire thing wasn't weird enough in the actual interview, we not only have to see it again in the following chapter, but also in more detail. Nobody wanted this scene. Move on, please. If I had the time, there was a long list of my body parts interested in touching his body parts. Girl, calm down. If this is how you're going to react towards all of the celebrities that you interview, you're not going to be in this line of work for long. After cleaning up the mess, Gabe stands there for a moment and comments that Channy has really big eyes. We need an entire page of this, and then Channy's mind kind of short-circuiting over this weird compliment. Then Gabe goes on to say that she looks like one of those Felix the Cat clocks with the moving eyes, which is honestly such a weird thing to say to somebody that you met 5 seconds ago. And then for the first time this entire book, the narration actually gives her a name. Not the little written by at the top of the previous chapter, which I only assumed was her name. Gabe asks how to pronounce it, which is fair. She says that a lot of people have problems with it, and the last celebrity she interviewed called her Hannah, which, how? How the hell do you get Hannah from Channy? Gabe says that he knew a makeup artist with another foreign name who always got misnamed and mispronounced, that her little story always stuck with him, which kind of the bare minimum level of decency to correctly pronounce another person's name, but sure. The only consolation is that Channy isn't tripping over herself over that little aside. He confesses that he'd been watching Channy walk up the path to his rental house and asks what she'd been muttering under her breath on the way up. She says that she sometimes talks to herself in order to organize her thoughts. Despite the fact that this lady was literally sent to his house to interview him, Gabe is really surprised that she is, in fact, a writer. Like, the fact that she could have writer thoughts is so foreign to him. He asks if she writes fiction too, and she agrees. Gabe confesses that he likes to read, and Channy asks like this is somehow a huge surprise. Lots of people read, including the people who are literally reading this book. It's not like he said that he knits sweaters from dog fur or something odd. Gabe then says that he has something to show her and goes into the bedroom. Channy is naturally like, whoa, a little too much access here. But he only wanted to show her the amazing view out the window. Except that Channy only has eyes for Gabe, who is so handsome. In case you'd somehow forgotten this tidbit in the last page, since Shani gushed about her attraction towards him, she distracts herself by looking at the books on his shelf, and despite Gabe having told her not even 60 seconds earlier, she's somehow surprised that there are a lot of recognizable titles and authors there. Ever since Jeremy and I had broken up, that thought had been circling in my head like an unswattable fly. It hadn't helped that my motivation had apparently walked out the door right after him. I hadn't written anything in weeks. Can't possibly have anything to do with you being depressed over the breakup. While all of my former MFA classmates were out there signing with agents or having short stories published or getting book deals, I was stumbling through the kind of assignments they all would have sneered at. I'm sorry, but your life is not theirs. Stop comparing yourself to other people. Then comes the answer to the question of why is this novel over 300 pages? This is because we then stop what little momentum that we had going simply so that Shani can info dump on this about how sad and depressed that she is. And I get it. Been there, done that. But literally nothing has been done to make me care about Chani up until this point, and her little pity party is forcing the plot to stall, which is making the first chapter, which is already bogged down with too much I don't care-itis, somehow worse. We finally get back to the plot when Chani notices a stack of classic movies sitting nearby. She randomly says a line from one of them which makes Gabe finally stop looking out the window, of which I'd like to remind the reader, since Chani was too busy ogling Gabe, we don't actually know what the view is of. Gabe explains that the James Bond director sent the old movies over as a character study, but that he hasn't watched any of them yet, or ever, to Chani's surprise. I don't want to be worshipped, I want to be loved, Gabe repeated. He had a good memory. It's a short line, and Chani literally said it not even a minute earlier. It's not hard to parrot 11 words. Gabe asks for clarification on the quote. Chani says that you can't actually love somebody if you don't really know them. She goes on to say that she loves the movie, but hints that there's a bad subplot, which he refuses to spoil for him. He says that his sister already told him the ending because siblings are terrible like that, I guess. Gianni then goes on a rant about this one scene where the father admits that because his daughter didn't love him enough, he randomly decided that he had to break up his marriage by sleeping with a much younger woman, which I've also never seen the Philadelphia Story, but WTF. Gabe is confused over Chani's opinion about this since he thought that she liked the movie. She insists that she does, and that there's a lot more to the movie than one bad subplot. But then she puts her foot in her mouth trying to say something cool. Gabe stands there and seems to kind of regret having invited her into his house, but then he proposes that they should go eat. This next section is another bonus chapter, which is what I've decided to start calling them, so bonus chapter 2. This is from what I sure hope is a fictitious website of serious_cinephiles.com and was written by Lost Lemming. 5 reasons why Gabe Parker will be the worst Bond ever. Which I'm 100% reading this entire thing in the voice of the comic book guy from The Simpsons, because that's the exact kind of thing that this is. The article has 5 bullet points and a random side point, so let's go through them. Point 1 is that Gabe isn't British, which seems like a fair enough case against his role as the character most famously known for being British. A fake accent can only get you so far, even in Hollywood. Point 2 is that the director clearly overlooked one of Gabe's former co-stars who is British and would be a better fit for the role, which I kind of get where they're coming from, but being the correct nationality doesn't exactly make them good for the role. Point 3 is that Gabe is kind of famous for playing himbos, not only on screen, but also he plays up that stereotype in his interviews, simply because he's trying to act like his on-screen counterpart in order to promote his movie should not automatically disqualify an actor from getting a different role, especially one that's not in the same kind of role. Point 4 is that Gabe is suspected to be sleeping with the Bond girl, Jacinda, which why the heck would that disqualify him? Ross seems to think that it's because it's unprofessional, which, again, but why? Plenty of stars hook up while they're shooting a movie together. Now, obviously, this article exists in a fictitious vacuum. There's no other articles that I can reference, but something tells me that Ross wouldn't have half as much of a problem with the dozens of other famous on-set hookups. He's simply finding excuses to hate Gabe. The list pauses here to slut-shame Jacinda for bouncing from celebrity boyfriend to celebrity boyfriend. This Ross guy seems like a really nice person. Not. I hope that he's not going to make a physical appearance in the story. Point 5 is really more of a subsection of point 3, which is to say that Ross thinks that Gabe's attitude is kind of off and not the desired mentality that James Bond should have, which again, he is literally acting. It is his job to make people think that he's some country bumpkin or a British super spy. And yeah, really not enjoying these bonus chapters. They're interrupting the flow of the story for pointless asides. But it was clearly the intent of the author that we read them, so read them I will. Thanks for listening to my Book Snark on YouTube. New videos are up every Monday, but stick around because I sometimes drop random videos on other days too. Just as a reminder, even if you can't financially support me, there are other ways to help me out. The first is watching this video as well as all my other videos. It's also important to like and subscribe. Finally, you can share this video with all of your friends so that they can help as well. If you're already caught up with all my videos, you can go to Tumblr for my main book snarks, always free and updated every morning. And if you've already read all of my main snarks, then you can find even more snark on my Patreon. You can access it for $1 a month. Members also get early access to my main Tumblr snark. Special thanks to Dawn, Phoebe, and Nikki for supporting me on Patreon already. If you want to hear your name in my video next week, either support me on Patreon or make a one-time donation. Do you like my Snark so much that you want me to Snark your rating? I do that too. For just $6 per chapter, I will tell you how awful that your rating is. But not to worry if you feel like you couldn't take the criticism. I also offer regular book editing as well, just $10 per chapter. You can contact me on any of my social media platforms if you have further questions. If you want to read some of the things that I've written, you can purchase my works on Amazon. I have a slew of erotic short stories and 2 full-length novels. I also frequently run flash sales on my stories, and if you don't follow me on any social media, you might want to do so just so you can know when I might be offering things for free. Links for everything will be posted below. See you next week, guys.